Make sure I have a tasty beverage.
Tasty beverage. All right,
Delicious.
let me close some of my superfluous bullshit I got going here.
But superfluous bullshit is what makes our show.
I can think of random shit like that all day.
Would you eat bamboo with me? I feel so stupid doing this.
What the hell was that?
The reaction shot was great. It's so dumb, but it was so good.
You guys are dumb.
Doesn't sound sincere at all.
I'm at a loss.
That's perfect.
All right, guys, so we had a listener email that I liked.
Yay!
Okay.
It is from Keegan Sutherland. And he says, hello, guys. Well, I suppose it could be a she, but I don't know. Keegan, Keegan.
I'm pretty sure that's a regular commenter on some of my videos, actually. I want to say like Keegan99 or something like that. I could be wrong on that, but I see that name often. In the comments.
94
Keegan
Keegan
98.
is how I signed it.
Is what?
So, anyways, I don't know who it is, but hello, guys. I really enjoy the podcast, and I'm always LMAO on every episode. I especially love the brackets you guys have been doing. My question for you guys is, what is your favorite video game of all time and why? And real quick, Jeff, respond to this first, and then we'll jump into the other part. But personally, he asks, also for Jeff, would you ever consider playing games with your YouTube fans, such as people from the Jay Sano fan server? And that's from 94 Keegan.
Yeah, actually, I just started a series with the Merry Gamer from the fan server. Just started posting, probably about a week and a half ago, based on when this goes out there. So check it out, Terra Restore, me and the Merry Gamer playing some Minecraft. But yeah, I enjoy doing collabs with people from the fan server and just other people in general. It's just, for me, it's more of a time issue.
Okay, guys, so best game ever. Are we talking by console or PC game or by decade or just all over,
Well,
like the whole century, basically?
You know what was really interesting to me when I read this? So for the listeners, kind of a look behind the curtain, I usually read all the email that comes in and kind of whatever strikes me we'll talk about or whatever. So when I read this email, I thought about video games. I'm an older guy. I don't really play that many video games anymore. I just don't have time for the most part. My older daughter plays a little, so I'll sit down and play with her. But I don't play like I used to. When I was a kid, I played all the time. So when I read this and started thinking about the question, like, it really brought back how into video games I totally was as a kid and how many good memories I have with video games. It's like music, where certain video games just like trigger memories of where you were and what you were doing and stuff. So when you talk about the best video game ever, I don't even know how to approach that question.
So, like, if somebody asked you, Mike, video games from your childhood, what is like the first game that would pop into your mind?
It really depends what part of childhood. Because, I mean, going back, I remember the first console I started playing on was like ColecoVision with my grandmother, who's been dead for like 15 years now, And like those video games by today's standards were horrible, but I'm never gonna forget playing like Venture and all that kind of stuff.
But they made a comeback when smartphones just started to come out. Like it was like, I thought that was so funny when phones came out and got like, not even the colored screen ones at first. I think one of the first cell phones I had a game on it. It was called Slot Machine. And all you did was like hit a button and it spun the slot machine and told you if you won or not. Like that was one of the games on the phone.
Well,
and I was just like,
I like Snake on the phone. Like the Nokia came out with the Snake automatically on there.
I think Snake was the next phone though. It was too advanced for that first phone that had the slot machine.
Well, it's interesting you bring up the old games coming back, because I just read, I don't know, somewhere that this Internet Archive website, if you do a Google search for the Wayback Machine, they just uploaded all MS-DOS games into their software.
Somebody
library.
just sent me the link to that the other day. Good old Badge. and a lot of people
Right.
listen to this no badge, and I checked it out. It's 2,000 games. They ran a DOS
Yeah.
box. Oh, I just lost all
Yeah,
of our
that
feeds.
box on the
Sorry,
website.
hold on a second. There we go. Now we're back. We ran a DOS box emulated online, which was pretty amazing because DOSBox is an extensive program. I actually, with some of the games that I do on my channel, I ended up getting in contact. One of the creators of DOSBox actually contacted me and wrote me special DOSBox programs. He updated the DOSBox to run certain games in the way that I wanted them to run, which I thought was awesome. That guy was amazing. Like, but the fact that they've ported this stuff over to run in an online environment, I was just like, I was blown away. I was blown
It's
away.
awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah. So I mean, like even those DOS games, like when I first started getting into computers, that's what there was, you know.
Well,
So
the greatest thing about it being on the website is like when using DOSBox on the PC, you have to configure everything per game, and it's such a pain and a hassle that you just don't want to play it. But if it's all on the web, already pre-set up.
Though I experimented with it the other day, and I'm literally saying like Badge just sent me the link to this like 2 days ago, so this is like all fresh because I was like messing around with it right when I saw it. Because I was like, this is awesome.
yeah, I was too.
Half the games though that have mouse cursors that I try to do, they don't utilize your mouse cursor. Like you put your mouse in the screen, and it almost is like it's emulating your mouse is now not your mouse pointer as an input, but right when you're focused on the window, it's emulating your mouse movements, as in it then moves the cursor based on your mouse movements, and it would get way off of where your mouse was actually pointing to. So it made it really. I tried to play Lemmings, so try to play Lemmings, and you'll see what I mean. And it was. So I'm sure there's a way to fix that, but either way, yeah. So what did you play? What was the first game you played, Mike? I have a feeling that I know the first game you loaded up on this thing.
Oh, what do you think?
Oregon Trail.
What's your guess?
Oregon Trail.
No, that was probably the second game I played.
Okay, yeah, I knew it was on the first page when I loaded up the thing, and I was like, Oregon Trail.
It was tempting, but the first thing I did was start scrolling through the games, and I came upon
Oh,
Leisure
look at
Suit
you
Larry.
doing your research.
Leisure Suit Larry. That was one of your like first games, right, Jeff?
It wasn't one of my first. It was up there with one of my first games, but actually, it's funny. Leisure Suit Larry, not only does that bring back so many memories, but so many people play that game, and right now there's a group of people on YouTube that I've recently come across because they're the funniest guys to listen to when they do stuff, but they're called either Steam Train or Game Grumps. They're like the same group that do these stuff, and they play a lot of old adventure games with a lot of other games. I mainly started watching them for their adventure game stuff, and they're doing Leisure Suit Larry 6 right now, but they've already done Leisure Suit Larry 1, and their commentary is so funny when they play through these games. It's like so I've been actually watching a lot of Leisure Suit Larry recently.
Yeah. Well, I just had an idea. We can kind of go, like, try to walk console through console and talk about what games, we really liked. I mean, I don't know if you guys go back as far as ColecoVision or Atari. Probably Atari.
2600 is my first console.
The first console that we had was called an Odyssey, and I don't even remember what the Odyssey is exactly, but all it had was a joystick with one button. So that was the controller, with a joystick with one button on it, and I don't remember too many games from it though, because this is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think we have to go back that far because there's so many other games on other consoles that we can talk about. I mean, Mark, if you played the Atari, I mean, you can appreciate like the Frogger and Pitfall and all that kind of stuff.
Pitfall, yeah.
Those are awesome games. But I mean, if you want to start with the Nintendo, I mean, I'm sure we were all.
Yeah, that was the first console that I had that I can remember like games and stuff on. That's what originally got me addicted to video. When I was a kid, I was addicted to video games.
Right.
Granted, I do a channel now on YouTube based on video games, and I really don't play that many games still. It's kind of like a weird way to look at things. Is my childhood was video game based. Now I do a channel based on video games, and I really don't play that many. Like.
I remember when I was a kid, my punishment whenever I did anything wrong, my mom, first thing, she's like, okay, I'm taking away your console.
Like, no.
Yeah.
That's how you punish me. Like, oh, go to your room. Okay. 2 more chores. Okay. Take away my console. No, I'll be good.
I mean, there were so many great games on that original Nintendo.
Yeah, Nintendo was the really really big breakthrough game that got me. I mean, console that got me hooked to video games.
Did
So
both?
I
what's
mean,
your,
like
Did both
Super
of you guys
Mario
have?
Brothers and sorry.
Oh yeah, did both of you guys actually have like Nintendos at your house?
yeah.
Like it wasn't that you played them at a friend's house. Which one did you have? Like because it came with Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt,
Hmm.
or Super Mario Brothers Duck Hunt and Track and Field. Did you guys have the Power Pad version?
No.
No,
So
I didn't have the power pad.
I had
know
the
you did.
Power Pad version, and what a flop in today's technology, but at the time was like the most amazing thing in the world.
It was awesome, the trackpad.
Yeah, it was cool. I didn't
Um,
have it, but I had plenty of friends who did.
That thing was fun. My sister and I used to like race in their little stupid Olympics, and then we learned how you could cheat because, nothing ever works. Oh, I'll just get on the floor and do this on the pads, and like this is me running.
And then you jump by jumping off the pad and then jumping back off the pad.
Look, the long jump. Boop, tap. Yep, that was legit.
And all the Mario games on that system were pretty good.
All the Mario games.
Did you ever try to
Splatoon,
play Mario games on the trackpad? Because of course I tried.
It's probably pretty difficult.
It's pretty impossible.
I remember like role-playing games were totally huge on that system. Like,
Because the original
I'm
Final
thinking back-
Fantasy was for that, right?
I'm sorry.
The original Final Fantasy? Was that for
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nintendo?
but even the original Final Fantasy was based off a game called Dragon Quest.
Okay.
I think it was called Dragon Warrior here in the States, I believe.
Right.
But I mean, it's the same gaming system. In fact, when I got Final Fantasy after Dragon Warrior, I thought they had to be made by the same people because it's the same gameplay. But those two, and then like Legend of Zelda, when you
Right.
talk about
Oh,
games
yeah.
like that, I can't even begin to figure how many hours of my childhood were spent on those three games.
Yeah. Same with Mega Man. I played all
Oh,
the
yeah.
Mega Man games that came out and spent hours playing. Well, really, like all the Mega Man games is gonna get a lot of hate mail for this, but I think they're very
the same thing?
exact same game.
I
basically.
agree with you.
But
Yeah.
every time it came out, I'm like, I gotta play hours and hours just to beat this game.
Yeah. Metroid? Did you play Metroid?
Yeah. I played Metro. I actually never got really into it as much as a lot of other people, though. Okay.
About Contra. Oh, I remember Contra.
Oh, Contra was well. One of the things that I really liked about Nintendo was there was a lot of two-player games, and when you have a brother or a sibling, like you have to play those kind of games because, Mario Brothers was great, but nobody wants to be Luigi and wait until that first person dies. Or like what happens is you play Mario and you play for like 5 levels, and then you play Luigi and you die right off the bat, and they have to wait until your brother dies. It's like
I still remember the Contra code. Do you guys? The
Up, down,
Konami
left,
code.
right,
Yeah.
BA
Nah.
start? Or is it up,
Select
down,
start.
down, left, right? Either
Up,
way.
up, down, left, right, left,
and then
right.
select start for 2 players.
Oh, that's what it was. Yes, 2 players would select.
Hold
start.
on. I'm gonna use Mark's controller and see if I can remember this. There we go. Yeah, I mean that's still like
Yeah,
that
no.
still makes a lot of like not headlines per se, but they throw back that code in a lot of games nowadays just for like
Yeah.
Nostalgia.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this: which Super Mario Brothers game do you like the best? Was it the original, number 2, or number 3
You mean you're saying just on the Nintendo?
on the Nintendo? Yeah.
I would go with 3. And that's mainly not because I necessarily think it's a better game, though I think the game was fantastic. I probably actually, if I really had to compare it, it probably was a better game. But I look at games in a different way, like Super Mario Brothers 1 now than I did back then. But I used to play that game with my mom all the time. So it's kind of like a memory thing that my mom and I used to sit down and play Super Mario Brothers and have a good old time doing that. So
Wow.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I started talking about when we brought up this topic was that I never really thought of video games as something that I link back to all these memories. Like you do music, you kind of equate songs with different places in time. And I never really thought of video games like that until I started brainstorming this. And then so many things came back to me. Friends when I was growing up that I used to play different games with. And like I remember when my parents told me they were getting a divorce, I was playing tennis on the NES system. Like not to get heavy or anything like that. I'm not trying to be the downer on the show, but like there was all these things that just totally came flooding back that I had no idea my brain had even linked to video games.
Wow.
You know?
Wow.
So,
Every single time you play virtual tennis, you're like crying.
I cried.
Little piece of Mike dies with every serve. He's like, now serving 40 love. He's like, there was no love there.
To this day, when I see a tennis ball, I have to throw it out of my sight immediately. But all right, I got way off track. But getting back to the Mario question, like I have to go with the original because I spent so many hours playing that game. I even played in like a Mario Brothers competition, like tournament style one time.
Was it a
I totally
speed?
lost.
Like speed runs, basically, or
Well, it took into consideration like points and like how many lives you had
okay.
at the end of a time limit. Like, yeah, you like it was 10 or 15 minutes
how
or
about-
something like that.
Well, what happens when you get to that level where you could just hop on that shell until you get like infinite lives?
That was why I lost because I screwed it up.
See,
So
and that's
glitching the screen
and that's why I say that I look at games in a completely different way nowadays because I have a lot more respect for Mario 1 because of watching the speed runs, watching the low score runs. Have you seen those ones? Where you try to get I think the lowest score it's either 700 or 900 points to finish the entire game and like how you do it and have to time the time at the end of the level to get the least amount of points but no fireworks and like it's crazy like it's amazing to watch what people have done with these old games, so I have a whole different level of respect for them.
Right. I would say Super Mario Brothers 3 though.
Nobody likes 2?
Nobody really likes 2. 2 was not originally a Super Mario Brothers game. They only switched it over to a Super Mario Brothers game when it came to the States. I remember when 2 came out, I was like, what the hell is this? I mean, I enjoyed it, but it was nothing like Super Mario Brothers 1. And number 3 seemed more like number 1 than number 2. So,
Right.
So didn't they have like what later got released as the Lost Levels in America? Wasn't that technically Super Mario Brothers 2 in like Japan, but for some reason that one didn't come over?
Oh,
they thought it was too difficult for Americans, and
to do?
they would.
wasn't that on Super Nintendo though?
Yeah, I don't believe they brought it out until the Super Nintendo, but it was the original the original like Super Mario Brothers 2 release that had happened in Japan. But then they gave us the
Weird
Egyptian-based platformer.
Choose your characters. Weird. Yeah.
Which
Oh.
Toad and Princess is all you ever needed to win that game.
I played Princess every time.
Yeah.
Toad at
She
the
had that
beginning.
float.
Toad at the beginning because you got to pull those little turnips real fast to get all the
All
coins.
the secret stuff.
Yeah, and then Princess for the
I
rest of
did.
the
I forgot about that. There was the one level where you go into the weird dark doorway and he just plucks coins like a crazy fool. But other than that, I always use the Princess.
I mean, think about the connection with those characters in that game. Let's talk about Mario Brothers 2 for a minute.
Okay.
Princess can fly.
Yep.
Yeah. Why?
Luigi can jump really high but really slowly.
Right.
Toad can pluck things really fast. I don't know how
She
much
was
to
a little
help that
shorter.
is. What did Mario do in that game?
He was sort of like the all-around character.
But I don't even know. Was he an average speed guy? He didn't fly. He didn't jump high. Did he pluck averagely? Like whoever played Mario?
I think he was just sort of in the middle, which is why nobody played him.
Right. I mean, you would play Toad over Mario if you want like speed and stuff. Luigi and Princess, I think, were a little bit slower.
I don't know.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I don't know.
Luigi, I really hated Luigi. The way he like moonwalks down, it just so annoying.
At least he had something going for him, though. Like he had a reason
Didn't he
you
have like
might
crazy
choose
legs
him.
too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he jumped his
Yeah, and especially when you first start that game and you start randomly at a door that drops you down for some reason, like through a level, and the first time you pick Luigi, you're like, what the hell is this guy doing? Like,
And then you run around the screen so it like wraps. So
yes.
Yeah, that was a weird game.
Okay,
Yeah.
enough about Mario 2. We don't need to discuss it anymore.
Well, how about Double Dragon? There was three versions, Double Dragon 1, 2, and 3. Did you play all three or?
I played two of. I've played the third one before. I was not as big of a fan of the third one. I loved 1 and 2.
Yeah. I would say 2 was my favorite. Did we
What?
lose Mike? We lost Mike.
Nope, he's just sitting there with his eyes closed, thinking in nostalgia.
He's trying to decide which one do I prefer. It's taking so much concentration, he can't even move.
He's frozen in memories. Hopefully a tennis
Oh
match
no!
didn't come
Is
on
it
behind
another like
him.
divorce? He's just frozen in terror or something.
In shock. So, Mike, what is your thought on Double Dragon?
I love Double Dragon. That was a really good game.
Right,
Enjoy.
but which one? 1, 2, or 3?
You know, I'm a sucker for originals, I guess. So I think the first one. I think they were all good. I played a lot of all of them, but I think
No,
the first.
did you used to get frustrated in that game because like you couldn't save your game, so you had your
Oh,
3 lives and that was it? It was.
for sure.
Did you ever
For
beat it
sure. Yeah. Oh yeah.
on the Nintendo?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I was like a gaming addict back then. So I was playing a game until I beat it.
Now, see, I don't think I ever beat that game until it came out on an emulator where I could save state and things like that.
Right. I think I think I might have beat it with the game Genie, but that was still even really hard because the game got really cheap at the end. Like especially that wall where sections would just pop out for no reason and then you would just die.
See,
And there were a lot of them there too.
I don't even remember that.
See, I remember Nintendo games being really cheap. Like the game would cheat for some reason at the near the end. Like you would just constantly die all the time. Like Mega Man, for example, whenever you get hit, you get sent back a little bit, and then that makes you fall off an edge, and there you die. Or Double Dragon's another one where you get hit a little bit, and then you fall off an edge, and you're like,
I'm trying to remember what game it was. There was a game, it was like a kung fu game, and all you did was walk on these platforms like you had to go on the bottom level, went from left to right, and the next level went from right to left, and at the end of it you just like walked up the stairs, and the whole thing was you were trying to get to your chick at the end and save the woman. And all you did was like kick and punch. I think that's all you had in this game, and I played this game for hours and hours and hours. I remember the day that I beat the final boss and was so excited, and I went running toward the edge of the screen where like the chick was that you're supposed to save,
yeah.
and my time expired like a fraction of a second before I hit the edge, and I was just like, Nintendo, why? I had beat the boss and I couldn't make it to the edge of the screen to like go like win the game, and I was so angry. What was that? I want to say the game might have just been called Kung Fu. Like
Well, Karate was a game,
yeah, something like that. I do remember that game. You guys remember Castlevania?
Yeah, Castlevania is also a really good game. And cheap, too.
I never
Medusa's
had-
head? I hate the Medusa heads.
I never had Castlevania. I didn't have Mega Man's like you were talking about earlier. Like I never owned any of these games. I only got to borrow those ones from friends. Like when trading games was big. Do you remember? I'll trade you this game for the weekend, And then you want to get all the time you possibly can into the game all the time you have it because.
One of my favorite games for the Nintendo was Chippendales Rescue Rangers.
That game was amazing. I loved that game.
It blew my mind that such a Disney game could be actually so much fun.
Yeah, I
remember
spent
playing
many
it.
hours on that game.
Yeah. I played a ton of sports games on Nintendo too. Double Dribble was big. Like all the original like Maddens and NHLs, those were good on that system too. Oh, I just
Tecmo Bowl? Was that on the
Tecmo Bowl. I played a ton of that too. Mike Tyson's Punch Out.
Punch Out was so hard.
I didn't have
Punch-Out.
Mike Tyson's Punch Out. I had just Punch Out, where Mike
Punch-Out?
Tyson lost his royalties or whatever.
Oh yeah. Those are good games.
Yeah.
I saw a recently I don't think it happened recently. I think it happened like 2 years ago. But somebody does Mike Tyson's Punch Out. He plays the entire game blindfolded
What?
and gets up to Mike Tyson, and he basically said, "I can't beat Mike Tyson blindfolded because I guess Mike Tyson's moves are random." Versus everybody else has a predictable pattern that you can know by everything. And he played the entire thing through blindfolded up to Mike Tyson. And I was just like,
That's
oh
nuts.
my God.
They actually have these other YouTube videos that I just saw not that long ago.
Kids
about,
react to like.
Yeah, the kids, teens reacting to different things. And one of them recently, fairly recently, I think, or at least I saw it recently, was reacting to Punch Out. It's pretty funny.
That tells you how good Nintendo is, because they really seem to enjoy the game, even though Mike Tyson's sort of a cheap game, I think, where it like kicks your ass really quickly if you don't know what you're doing. But you know, like with all these really cool games out right now, you can just still play Nintendo games and still have a blast playing them.
Right.
So enough about the NES. Moving on, console generation, Super Nintendo.
I never had a Super Nintendo.
You never had a Super Nintendo?
I didn't own one either.
Actually, I would say that Sega was before the Super Nintendo came out.
It could have been.
think.
Okay, we'll go to
It could
Sega.
have been. All right,
I
we'll
didn't
go
know one
Sega.
of those either, though.
I owned a Sega. I loved it.
I had a Sega. You know, I'm actually just sitting here trying to think of my favorite games for Sega, and all I think about are Sonic.
Yeah,
What else
Sonic,
is there for Sega?
Sonic 2 was good because you had this Tails character that was sort of like the second player, but not really, because the game.
Right, they just kind of hung around in the background picking up coins and stuff. I do, or rings. Yeah, I remember that.
But one of the things I really liked about Sega is you had the Sega Genesis, then you had like the 32X that you attached to it, then you had your Sonic 3 game cartridge, and then you had your Sonic 2 game cartridge that you could put on top of that, and then maybe a Game Genie somewhere in between. So you get like this really nice stack, and then you have your your Sega CD on the side.
So yeah, what was the deal with Sega and all the add-ons to that thing? Like, I get CD maybe because they wanted games with higher memory that they didn't fit in the cartridge, but like the 32X, doesn't that just make it a new system?
Sort of. It was to increase the RAM or something like that of the Sega Genesis. Instead of having people buy a whole new console, they're like, oh, we'll just add this. Sort of like when Nintendo 64 came with the extended memory pack.
I didn't know N64 did that.
Yeah. So, so you had all these attachments, but I think there was a point where Sega's like, well, screw this, let's just make the Sega Saturn, but that didn't work out for them as well.
We'll flop miserably with the Sega Saturn.
They also had something else before the Sega Saturn, I think.
They had the Game Gear.
The GameCube.
No, that was
it the
Nintendo.
Cube? That was Nintendo.
They had the Game Gear, which was the competitor for the Game Boy, and I thought the Game Gear was amazing because it was like a full color, like portable gaming system. But the batteries literally lasted like 2 minutes on that thing.
The Game Gear was pretty good. They actually came out with something called the Nomad, which was basically the Sega Genesis, where you actually put Sega Genesis games into the portable device.
Really?
It was huge, and it ate up batteries like.
I remember they had the Game Gear cartridge for the Genesis itself, and then you could put the Game Gear games and play them on your Genesis.
Right.
But I didn't have a Genesis. I only had the Game Gear.
Yeah, Game Gear was pretty good.
For a portable machine. For a portable.
Yeah.
I don't remember near as much about these machines as you do. The Sega versions.
Right.
I was more of a Nintendo guy, I guess.
Yeah, I think I'm more of a Nintendo guy too, because when I think of Sega games, Sonic is mostly it. Altered Beast was a good game on the Genesis, but
I played a lot of Mortal Kombat.
oh yeah, Mortal Kombat on the Genesis.
What was the Sega Genesis controller like? I don't even remember.
It was sort of like a round, like a bean.
I'm gonna look it up.
It would look like a bean, and it originally came with like 3 buttons. But when like Street Fighter 2 came out, you really needed the control pad with the 6 buttons to play.
I always played Street Fighter 2 on Super Nintendo. So
Oh yes, the bean. It
Uh,
all makes sense now. Hold on, I'm gonna put an image up of the bean for everybody to see.
I totally just remembered another game that I wasted hours of my youth on for the Sega.
okay.
NBA Jam.
NBA Jam was really good. You could
I
play
played
as Bill
Was
Clinton
that was a Sega
as one of
game?
the codes. Yeah.
Really?
It
That
was
was a-
Sega and Super Nintendo. Like basically, games came out on both consoles. Mortal Kombat had blood on the Sega version. The Super Nintendo was more family friendly, so they had green blood. I think was one of the cheats that you could put on. But it's not real blood because it's not red, so it's okay.
We can kill aliens. That's allowed. You just
Yeah.
not humans.
wasn't there was another fighting game I used to play quite a bit too. Like
Street
Mortal
Fighter?
Kombat, Street Fighter 2, and there was one more.
Why not Street Fighter 1? Why does everybody go straight to Street Fighter 2? Like, what's the deal?
Uh, Street Fighter 1, I don't know if it came out for the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo. I think maybe Street Fighter 1 might have came out on Nintendo. It was mostly a console, arcade game, I think.
I was going to say I played a lot of that game in arcade format, but I did have it for Super Nintendo as well. Samurai Showdown was the game I was thinking of.
That's a good one. Neo Geo, right?
I think maybe that was mostly played that on arcade.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever owned that at home.
So I guess Sega is going to be a little bit shorter because it doesn't bring back the feels like we used to have.
Mm-mm.
So Sega Genesis and then Super Nintendo, pretty similar to Sega, I think. There's Super Mario World. I
Is that
never
what it was called? Super Mario Land?
Yes.
Or
No,
Super
Super Mario
World.
World, definitely, because that is huge right now for speedruns.
Okay.
So you know that they're still coming up with exploits in that game to make speedrunning even better.
Right. I
It's,
hear
it's,
about that.
it's amazing. They just came out with one a couple weeks ago. Like, I mean, it's crazy that now they're still finding ways.
Right. And it's all exploiting like the memory. Like, oh, it glitches.
Right. Like the newest one is the Loki cloud, and at one point if you do something in just a certain way you get a Loki cloud in your inventory, which would normally not be a big deal when you deploy it. It's just like Mario rides in a little Loki cloud. But they also found out that at the end of the game during the Bowser battle that they reused the coding because they ran out of room of the Loki cloud position to determine timers on Bowser. So if you put him in certain spots on the screen, it speeds up the sequence and lets you do things faster. Like, it's
That's
off
nuts.
the wall the way that they're coming up with this stuff.
That's
Okay.
crazy.
So then after Sega Genesis, you had the choice between Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation.
Do you not want to talk about any Super Nintendo games other than Super Mario World? Is that it?
Well,
I
actually,
was
I
gonna
haven't
say,
ever. Oh, go ahead. I didn't have a Nintendo, Super Nintendo, so.
I wasted so much time on the Final Fantasies for that console.
Which ones were
It was
on
great.
that console?
Well, I specifically remember 2 was my big time waster. 3 I played. I'm pretty sure I beat it, but I think most of my time was spent on 2. And 2, in my mind, actually thinking back to it now, was probably one of my favorite games of all time. I still think about that game occasionally. I've never made the effort to go back and play it, but
I think Secret of Mana was also on the Super Nintendo.
it might have been. It might have been. I remember F-Zero Racing for Super Nintendo. Too.
And Mario Kart.
Mario Kart.
Oh,
That's
Mario
that's what
Kart.
you can't forget, the good old Mario Kart.
I could never play it on the Super Nintendo.
Well, did you play the 64 version first?
Yeah.
See, that's probably why. It's
It's much better on the 64 version, my opinion at least.
I would agree with that opinion. However, I learned about Mario Kart because of Super Nintendo. And
okay.
it was one buddy in high school or in middle school and high school that when I'd go over to his house, I was always so excited because I knew he had Mario Kart. So we would play Mario Kart like. Love
Well,
Mario Kart.
I think Star Fox also came out on the Super Nintendo, and I never played it on the Super Nintendo, but I remember seeing the commercials and seeing those 3D polygons, and I was like, holy crap, look at the graphics of this one.
And looking back on it now, like it was so ridiculous.
He's got
It was
triangle
so.
arms. It's amazing.
Oh,
But yeah, that was a pretty good system. Like I feel like I played way more games on it than I'm remembering though.
I
'Cause
would agree, even though I didn't own one, but I can't think of many for it.
No, I'm the same way, and I did own one, and I know I
Oh,
played it like a madman.
Chrono Trigger.
Chrono Trigger was on the Super.
Yeah.
That,
That was,
and I never played it on the Super Nintendo. I never played that game until emulators came out, but I was addicted to that game on a SNES emulator for the longest time.
Hmm.
yeah, that was a good game. I actually I don't really get into too many RPG games. I think it's just like a linear story to me, but I guess that's almost all games though.
I mean, yeah, they used to be all games because now open world and sandbox games are like so big, but at that point you couldn't do something like that. Like you had to have a start to end progression.
There were a couple at that time, I believe. Well, not really, I guess sandbox, but like oh, what was that game called? Like Populous?
Populous, yeah.
Wasn't that the game where you like created a civilization and tried to kill somebody else? I guess I don't.
I'm not sure. That was sort of like
So I mean,
like
SimCity existed
Civilization.
back then, and they had a SimCity ports and stuff for like the Super Nintendo. But I mean, they were ported over PC games, so I'm not 100%
Right.
sure
I
how.
think I'm pretty sure Populous was a Super Nintendo game that was kind of similar, except it was. I may be reaching, and I'm sure I'll get email if I'm wrong on this, but I'm pretty sure that Populous was you built up this civilization with the like express, like you were like a deity type figure.
Like one of the first Sky games, right?
Yeah, sort of, and you kind of had these followers, and you could raise and lower land, and there was another deity type character
Yeah,
who
yeah.
could screw up your land or cause earthquakes and stuff on your property, and you had to do the same to them and try to eliminate the other player.
Gods battling.
God's battling.
Whoever
Uh,
thought.
let's go over to Nintendo 64. Now that's a game. Well, I remember when the controller first came out and everybody saw the controller for the first time. That left an impression in most people's mind. It was like a M shape, or I don't know how else to describe it.
It's on the screen now for everybody who's watching this to be able to see it. But I want to know, did they really ergonomically think that this was the best design, or was it more of a wow factor type of deal that they were going for with this?
Well, it didn't really wow me, as in confuse me, but I did like how the controller felt.
But
I was going to say, I got used to it after a while because I had a Nintendo 64. This was actually the first system where I'm starting to get into the point in my life where I was playing way less video games. So I had an N64, but I don't remember a whole lot of games I played for it.
Wayne
Hey.
Gretzky 3D hockey. We played
I remember that one.
hello of that game.
that's where the first time Mark and I ever hung out outside of work was to play that game.
Well, it's funny you say that because my fondest memory of the N64 was when we all started hanging out, I believe, at my house after I bought my house, and we would play 007, multiplayer
Oh,
007.
yes.
GoldenEye,
Oh, 007. That's right.
And wasn't there another? Oh no, there was another like first-person shooter game I think we used to play that I'm pretty sure was on that system as well, but I don't remember what it was called now. Oh, I just had it. I think
Does
the
it start
girl
with Jaw?
No, I know what you're thinking
The
about.
girl.
It's a follow up to GoldenEye where you had
Oh.
like the laser gun that could see through walls.
Yeah,
Until-
I can picture exactly what game you're talking about, but I don't remember what game it was. I remember because it was the game that when it came out for PC, it had all the nude hacks. But the nude hacks were well. I remember this because I thought it was hilarious because all the nude hack did was changed her outfit to like skin colored outfit, but
Right.
part of her outfit was like this thing that went up here, so it was literally just like this skin colored like big cape end that came down.
Why do I want to say it was like Perfect Dark or something like that?
Yeah.
Because maybe it was
Perfect Dark Zero, something like that. Anyways, that was really great. Yeah, I like the joystick. That's where you like from the Atari 2600. That's when you start getting the joystick back into video games.
Hmm.
The Rumble Pack, so controllers actually rumbling when you're
Oh.
playing, was on the Nintendo when Star Fox 64 first came out. The expansion pack that you added to the Nintendo 64, I can't for the life of me remember what game it was. But it was a game where you had to actually open the little lid in the top of the console and remove the memory pack and put a new memory pack in. So Nintendo 64 was really pretty great for a lot of reasons.
And Mario
But-
Karts.
and Mario Kart was an excellent game.
Oh,
The little-
you know what we missed on the Super Nintendo? Revolutionary in the Super Nintendo. Donkey Kong Country.
Donkey Kong Country was a really
You know,
great
I
game.
almost said that actually, and I forgot we got off on something else. But yeah, that was a really good game.
Sorry,
In
back to
fact-
64.
Well, I was
Oh,
going to say,
actually, I was going to elaborate a little bit on Donkey Kong Country. Like
Donkey
when I started, well, not when I first started dating my wife, but I remember
when he was stalking her.
Yes.
Before she knew you existed, but you knew who she
Right.
was.
Right, exactly. When she was going to college at Central Michigan, like that was her gaming system. Like she's not a big gamer, so she still had like the old school Super Nintendo, and this was what, 8 years ago, something like that. And we would go up there, or I would go up there on my weekends or whatever off of work, and we would play Donkey Kong Country on our Super Nintendo. So I have fond memories of that game for sure. But okay, you can go back to the 64 now.
I was gonna say 64, like when Mario 64 came out, it was one of those first really eye-popping games where you play a 3D character, like where 3D really starts getting pushed on consoles, which I think is something that I really appreciate about Nintendo 64, but also buyer's regret when I bought my Nintendo 64, because at the same time Nintendo 64 was out, or when I bought it, there was PlayStation, and I was really trying to decide, should I get a 64 or a PlayStation? And I went with Nintendo 64 because I had fond memories of Nintendo. And then all these great games came out on the PlayStation, and I was like really jealous. And Nintendo 64 was like horrible on releasing games. You get like 10 games a year, and it just it just crushed me. Like,
Well, and it was so funny that those were the two competing consoles as well, whereas N64 was still a cartridge-based game, and
Right.
PlayStation was now, a CD-based game, which who would go with a cartridge at that point? But N64 did.
Didn't Sega try to come out with a CD-based?
Yeah,
console?
they did it was as the original add-on to the Sega Genesis, and then Mark said the Saturn was like their
Oh, the Saturn.
their full
The
like
Saturn.
CD console that was we didn't talk about much because it was pointless.
well, the Saturn didn't have the I don't know exactly what you would call it, but the chip that allowed 3D games, and the PlayStation did. So they spent the extra money, and then when the games came out, it was easier for developers to make PlayStation games that actually had 3D polygons. So I think that's sort of what killed the Saturn.
So are you saying that you didn't like the fact that you had an N64 versus a PlayStation? What would be the game that you were most upset about? Because there has to be a point that what was the game you bought the N64 for instead, and then what came out that you were like, I've made the wrong choice?
Well, I had Mario 64, and I really loved that game, and some of the other games for the 64. and I had GoldenEye, and that was like my only game that I could say like, well, at least I have GoldenEye. I get to play that game, and that was great. But yeah, I remember like PlayStation came out, Metal Gear Solid
Metal
was a
God, that's what I was wondering
huge
if you were gonna
game
go with Metal
that I
Gear
was
Solid.
really jealous of. Castlevania Symphony of the Night was like one of my all-time favorite games in the world, and that came out on the PlayStation. The game that our friend Matt used to love playing, Soul Edge, which was the precursor to Soul Calibur, which was a fighting game that was.
Was it Soul Blade?
It was. I think it was called Soul Edge, but it might have been called Soul Blade. I know like the sword is called like sword.
Yeah.
Soul.
He was. I remember Matt was addicted to that game. Like addicted to that game.
And Matt was one of those guys who like always picked the cheapest character, Siegfried, and he would just use this huge sword and just like mash and bash his way to victory. And then like once you start learning the mechanics of the game, you could like beat him with actual skill.
He would get so mad.
Really
He
upset.
would get so mad.
That actually, you just reminded me of a funny story. I should have talked about. I totally forgot about this when we were talking about the NES system, but how I talked about earlier how I have all these memories just flood back linked to games. There was, and I can't remember what the game was called because it was a hockey game, but it wasn't the NHL franchise
On the NES.
because yes. Maybe it was just called ice hockey. I don't remember at the time, but there was literally, I think there were three different guys. One was, it kind of goes back to what we talked about with Mario 2, where there was one super skinny guy who was really, really fast. There was a medium guy, and then there was a super big fat guy who was super slow, but if he checked you, you lost the puck and you fell down.
Wait, what did they have like a shooting game like in between one of the rounds? One of the periods? I think it was Blades of Steel or something.
Oh, I used to like that one too, but that wasn't this game.
There was like a shooting game in the middle of it for no apparent reason, but I
I
love
like Blades of Steel. The fighting in Blades of Steel was like cool.
great.
But no, this was way cheaper graphics than Blades of Steel. And you could choose, like, it wasn't even actual hockey teams. It was US and Russia and like Sweden. And,
Sweden.
yeah, it was weird. But so anyways, my buddy growing up, his name was Tony Gonzalez. He lived down the street from me. So this one time we were playing, he was a really sore loser. Like we were just talking about Matt was a bad loser. So Tony was too. And Tony could never beat me at this hockey game. And he used to get so mad. Well, we were at his house playing one day, and he had like a little, it was like maybe like a 13-inch black and white TV in his bedroom, you know? So we were playing this hockey game on it, and I just waxed him. I don't even know how many games in a row I beat him, but I beat him a ton in a row. And he just kept getting more mad, and throwing his controller down, you know? And finally, he just got up and threw his controller against the wall and said, "I would have beat you if I could see the colors." No, you probably wouldn't have.
No, were you guys ever controller bashers?
I was.
Mark?
No, not really.
See, I wasn't either, but I remember I have a half brother, and I remember as a little kid when he would come over and play games, and he would take like the controller and be like, he'd do something wrong, and he'd like start smashing it into the ground, and I was always like, oh, this is how grown-ups play video games. Like he wasn't even a grown-up, he was, you know, just a couple of years older than me, and I remember like when he left, and of course my parents didn't say anything to him, because I don't know if they didn't see it or what. I was a little kid. I didn't know if it was like, you know, whenever there's half siblings around, there's a whole weird family dynamic and stuff going on. But he had gone back to, you know, his mom's place, and I was playing, and I think I took the controller, and I wasn't even doing it because I was so angry. I was doing it because I thought that was how, like, oh, you do this. This is how you're supposed to do things. And I was like, oh, and I thought I was like, you know, like, hey, my mom's sitting there, like, I'm gonna show her like what I really know. Oh man, I screwed up. It was like, you're grounded, Jeff. The game, like, cut the console. I'm like, no, I thought that's how you were supposed to do. I'm really not mean to the controller.
I held it together in front of other people, but if I was just home on my own and I was playing, like, you know, I don't know, one of those games like Metal Gear springs to mind where it was hard to find save points, and we kind of talked about that earlier. So if I gotten really close to a save point and died, like, oh yeah, then I was bashing that thing on the floor for sure.
I remember, I think it was for the Nintendo 64. There was this game that my brother and I was playing, and we got almost all the way to the last boss. And my cousin Steven came over to visit, and I have no idea exactly why he did it, but he like hit the reset button, and there was no save point, so we lost like 2 or 3 hours worth of work, and it was just you want to. Like, you get so frustrated. And like, it's almost ridiculous now how many save points there are in games now. But back then, like, it was all or nothing. If you didn't beat that game in one sitting, you got to start all over.
And I can't even do that nowadays. I can't play a game. If my computer crashes and I have to reinstall, I will abandon half the games that I've been playing. Because I'm just like, it's not worth it anymore. Like, I'm done. Tune in next week, everybody, for the conclusion of Game Talk with the WDWK Podcast crew. Check us out on our website, wdwkpodcast.com. Follow us on YouTube at youtube.com/WDWK Podcast. Twitter, WDWK Podcast. Or email us with any questions or comments, WDWKpodcast@gmail.com.